Hello friends, I'm Fide from Hemal Thanki, and today I'm going to show you some basic ideas of the Scotch Gambit. Now, who can go for Scotch Gambit? I would say that the player whose rating is below 2000 can adopt this opening. When you cross the rating barrier of 2000, then I would advise you to go for either Scotch, pure Scotch, or the Rue Lopez, or the Italian opening. But this is actually extremely good for the rated player whose rating is below 2000. He can um, easily get a good position, sometimes even the equal position. So I'll show you some basic ideas of Scotch Gambit. Okay, before starting to the Scotch Gambit, we have to compare it with pure Scotch, and we have to check the different move orders for the Scotch Gambit, how you can go for the Scotch Gambit. Okay, so let's start with the very interesting opening. Okay, we start with e4, e5, knight to f3, and now here, if you just want to avoid the Petrov with knight to f6, then you can just start with another move orders. So this is just a move order trick, but okay, if you just avoid some line, then at the same time you have to prepare against some additional options too. So let's say if you start with bishop to c4, in that case, like, opponent has a chance to play bishop c5 or some moves like c6, but the most common reactions are here, like either knight f6 or the move knight to c6. So if knight c6, in that case you can start with knight to f3, and next move, after knight to f6, you can just transpose into our routine variation of Italian, and even from this move order, basically you can achieve the move d4, and that's what basically our uh, Repertoire 1 that I'm going to show you. And another idea here, which is also possible, is just castle. So these are the two different variations we can look at with this move order. Another possible variation here, you just to avoid the Petrov, you can just start with d4 straight away. And after takes, okay, here normally there are two variations, in fact three variations. One is queen takes d4, which is known as uh, center game, or just you can play c3, which is known as the Danish Gambit. But here I would just advise you to start with the simple knight to f3 if you are just looking for to start with 2d4. Okay, and now here if someone goes for knight to c6, let's say, then we transpose to the Scotch Gambit, and this is known as a Scotch Gambit, in fact. Okay, and what we did with this move order, actually we avoid Petrov, right? Okay, now but in additional, like here you just need to prepare something like knight to c6. Okay, now, okay, knight c6 means bishop to c4, that will transpose. Okay, here opponent can go for bishop to c5, and after bishop to c4, again knight c6 will transpose into the routine line, but here opponent can go for d6, and that's basically a little bit different as compared to the Scotch Gambit. Okay, although we'll try to cover this kind of similar structure in another move order. Here you can play simple c3 or even knight takes d4. But here if you play knight takes d4, which is very similar to Scotch, but bishop is already outside of the pawn chain, which is on c5. So the this way of playing a Scotch Gambit, which is not that ideal. So here normally we used to play c3 if you are going for 2d4. Okay, now my recommended move order is to knight to f3, which I am going to cover in this whole series. Okay, now here knight to c6. Okay, knight f6 is possible, that we can deal with other move orders, but let's say now knight to c6, now d4. Okay, it's possible to start with still bishop to c4. But then it's basically pure Italian move order that is again the topic of discussion. I'll come back to this move once I'm comparing it with Scotch Gambit. Okay, but now well, let's go to the pure Scotch Gambit move order. That's basically d4 takes and now bishop to c4. Now after bishop to c4, I would say that there are mainly two moves. One is bishop to c5 and the another move which is knight to f6. Okay, if someone goes for some other moves like say bishop to e7, now if you compare this line with the pure Scotch move order, bishop e7, which is a very inferior version in Scotch. So here I would just advise to take knight into d4. Okay, although some player prefers to play c3, I have played c3 move even in tournament as well, but the very annoying move here is knight to a5, and just because of this move I would recommend to go for knight d4, not to c3 in fact. Okay, there are some traps like, okay, if someone takes, you just have queen to d5, but okay, this all threats are just like on paper. In reality you'll never going to achieve this, so it's better to go for some standard moves like knight to d4 straight away rather than c3. Okay, so here after bishop e7 I would just advise to go for pure Scotch where you have basically a superior version. Same way, if someone goes for here, let's say g6, this is again an inferior version basically in Scotch. So even here I would just recommend to enter into pure Scotch mode. Okay, same way like d6, again basically black kept his bishop on f8, so it's again an inferior version. So here as well you can just enter into Scotch with knight to d4. Now okay, just I'll give you the small idea of the Scotch, why Scotch is very complicated, and okay, here the main move orders are in fact either knight to f6 or bishop to c5. All other moves are just inferior. So basically we are not worried about all other moves which we can mate with Scotch Gambit 2. Let's say here if knight to f6, now there are two ways to continue here. One is knight to c3, then here the best move for black is bishop to b4, and after takes bishop d3 d5. And after e takes d5, the very strong move for black is short castle. You can't go for another pawn with the d6 because your king is basically stuck in center. So it is better to go for short castle. And after c takes d5, bishop g5, now our threat is to take on d5 after bishop into f6. So c6 is forced. And here there are mainly three lines, knight e2, h3 and queen f3. But okay, the position remains level, so this is another way to play a pure Scotch opening, not Scotch Gambit, but a pure Scotch opening. Another line which is possible after knight d4 and knight f6 is the main line, which is extremely complicated, and that starts with knight to c6. And after knight c6, b6, again there are two lines. The very less famous is queen to e2, and the very famous move which is e5. And after knight to d5, we can straight away play c4. So the main move which is basically queen e7, and after queen e2 knight d5, if you play c4 then bishop to a6, so which is a main move c4. And nowadays the another line which gets popularity, which is even the 8th move h4. So this is about the small idea of Scotch with knight f6 move order. The another best move order for black is bishop to c5 other than knight f6. So here again white has basically three options. One is basically bishop e3, queen f6, c3. But I would just prefer two options, which is basically my second repertoire in Scotch. That is knight to b3, bishop b6 and knight c3, with the idea of queen e2, bishop e3 and just long castle. Okay, some interesting endgame ideas with the move knight to c6. And if someone goes for dc6, which is just an inferior version, if you compare it with the Ruy Lopez exchange variation, the problem is if someone takes with the d pawn here, then after exchanging the queens, we just have a superior pawn structure. We have okay, just I'll show you. After d6, basically queen into king into, and now you can see like black has 4 pawns on queen side while we have 3 pawns, right? And if you eliminate all the pieces from the chessboard, then if you are playing a king pawn ending, this ending is winning for white because we have virtual extra pawn on king side. So here the main move which is basically queen to f6, and here mainly there are two moves. One is queen to f3, and basically we are inviting black to play this endgame, or even queen to d2 with the idea of queen to f4, and again we are just trying to play endgame. So like this is of course a good way to play, but I know that at the initial stage, or we can say even the rating below 2000, the players actually want some initiative right from the opening. So I would not cover this one because there are some advantages even in endgame. So okay, this is basically a separate repertoire. Okay, we'll cover it later. But I told you why the Scotch Gambit have some attacking ideas as compared to this one. Okay, although with the precise play it's equal, but let's move to the Scotch Gambit now. Now after bishop to c4, all the inferior variations other than bishop c5, knight f6, we just like to transpose into pure Scotch where we have advantage. Got it? Now we'll just check only two variations, that is knight to f6 and bishop to c5. Okay, now if someone goes for, let's say, bishop to c5 here, again here white has two choices. One, he can go for either c3 or short castle. Now what's the difference? I'll just tell you. Okay, so we'll just move to the second, just 1 minute. Just move to the second part. Yeah, here it is. It's basically this one, that is a repertoire 1 in Scotch Gambit. Now what is this? Okay, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4 takes bishop c4, and we told you, I told you that either knight f6 or bishop c5, that's what the main move. Now after bishop c5, our one repertoire which is very similar, we just try to push our e5 pawn. That is one kind of repertoire which is basically very standard and like a comfortable too. You are not sacrificing too much, and this is basically c3. Of course dc3 kind of moves are bad, just you have basically bishop f7. So here the main move which is knight to f6, and here the 6 cd4 move here which is very dry, that I'll cover it later, but which is not that strong. So here I would just recommend to go for e5, and after e5, d5, basically we have two moves again, bishop b5 and bishop e2, that will be covered later separately. So this is what our one move order with the move bishop to c5. Okay, and the another move order which is knight to f6, and again after knight f6 basically we have two ideas. One which is basically belongs to e5. So one repertoire which is belongs to e5 where we are trying to achieve e5, does not matter what opponent is playing, either bishop c5 or knight f6. Even in bishop c5 what we did, we just played c3, after knight f6 we played e5. If someone goes for fourth knight f6, that is known as two knights variation. Even in that variation we just play e5. And after this move, basically black has three options: knight e4, knight g4 and d5. All three moves we are going to cover in our repertoire. And if someone plays d5 here, then we just go for bishop to b5, and after knight to e4, okay, there is one move knight to d7 as well, but okay, which is not that popular. after knight e4, knight takes d4, and here we'll cover two moves from black side, that is bishop d7 and bishop to c5. Okay, so basically this is repertoire number 1 in Scotch Gambit. Now the second repertoire, which is basically very aggressive, that I am going to show you now. Okay, so now after the second move, let's say e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and now again d4 takes and bishop c4. Again, all the variations other than knight f6 and bishop to c5 are not that ideal. Okay, I'll just show you one small trick before going to knight f6 and bishop c5. There is one move which is bishop to b4 check. Now if you compare it with the another move order, that is starts with, let's say, bishop to c4, the second move bishop c4, where we can transpose it to the Scotch Gambit. That is a small difference I like to mention here. That is after knight to f6, d4. Now after d4, here knight e4 is not good just because of d into e5, and if someone takes on e4, you can just play knight to f3. Okay, if someone plays knight c6 or bishop c5, basically will transpose, sorry, bishop c5, which is not good, e5 is coming. So if knight c6 someone like to transpose into two knights, then it is fine. But here there is two other lines which we have to face. Of course, we are avoiding we are avoiding Petrov, so we have to be prepared against two additional options, and the one additional option is this one. But then we can just play queen to d4, and this is very aggressive idea again. Okay, we are just attacking the knight, and if you play knight f6, we can just play knight to c3, and just next move is basically bishop g5, and we achieved a very quick development, and we are ready to do castle on both the sides. So this is one way to avoid Petrov, but the only problem with this idea is bishop to b4 check. Now if you say, okay, like similar kind of structure we are able to achieve one with the two knight f3 as well, but no, it's not true. Now I'll tell you the important difference. Here if we play c3, that's what we have to do, otherwise we are not achieving quick development. So let's say if we play c3, the difference is this king is just ready to move on short side, while if you start with second knight f3, and if opponent has committed knight to c6 here, now the difference is if opponent plays bishop to b4 check here, the knight is on g8 still. So after c3 just takes, basically we can achieve queen b3, bishop a3 very quickly, and black do not have that quick short castling. So here it is far better as compared to bishop b4 check with the second bishop c4 move order. Okay, so hope you understood this difference. Now after bishop to c4, what's the max length attack and the Morphy attack? That's what basically I am going to show you, which is the second repertoire in the Scotch Gambit, which is even more aggressive. Okay, so here let's say if someone starts with the bishop c5 order. Now here we can go for even short castle. Okay, if you like c3, you can play c3 and e5 idea. That's what basically we have covered in repertoire 1. And let's say short castle. Now if someone goes for knight to f6 here, this is what a very energetic line, and both are entering into the very sharp variation, which is one of my favorite idea as well, and that's the move e5. Okay, and after e5, the main move is actually d5, and here we just take on f6 takes on c4, and now again there are two variations, that is rook e1 check or f takes g7. Again this will cover into the separate part. Okay, first of all I would just like to tell you the viewers that just try to comment on the comment section which variation you like to learn. That I can start first, the repertoire 2 or the repertoire 1. Here we just take on g7, or we can play rook e1, takes on g7, rook g8. Again we have two ideas, either bishop g5 or just rook to e1. These lines are very sharp. So this is repertoire number 2. Another idea for black here is just to play the move d6. Probably I would say that this is the strongest idea. And here, like, we can just go for c3, and a very strong move for black is bishop g4. So this again we'll just try to cover in our separate video. Okay, now if you compare this variation with the bishop c5, now is it possible to achieve a max length with a different move order? Yes. Now I'll show you the another way to achieve this. Okay, let's say after bishop c4, knight to f6, and now we go for short castle. And again, if someone plays bishop to c5, then we reach to the pure max length with the move e5, right? And after d5, again we reach to the same order. But the only difference is opponent can just take on e4 with knight, right? So again, after knight takes e4, we can just continue with rook to e1, and we are just trying to take the knight. f5, which is bad, we'll cover it separately, but the main move, which is basically d5. Here we can just take bishop takes d5. This is a very strong move, and after queen takes d5, we just continue with knight to c3. And here we are just trying to cover 6 moves, which are basically queen to c4, queen f5, queen a5, queen d7, queen d8, and queen h5. All 6 moves we are going to cover in our future videos. So this is known as a Morphy attack when someone is taking on e4. So like, this is a very strong gambit, although with the very precise play black will achieve equality. So like, see this position, which is very easy to play as white, with this knight c3, and it's very aggressive idea. While at the same point, if you just want to stick to some solid stuff, here you can just play e5 and enter into repertoire number 1. So mainly in Scotch Gambit, I would say you have 2 repertoires. One, repertoire number 1, after knight to f6, we just play e5, and same way in bishop c5, we just play c3, and after knight f6, we just play e5 followed by cd4. And repertoire number 2, if someone plays knight f6, we just go for castle. We allow him to enter into max length with bishop to c5, or we allow him to accept the Morphy gambit with the knight into e4 and just rook to e1. Okay, now is it possible to achieve the max length with any other move order? Yes. Now let's say after knight f3, knight c6, if we start with bishop to c4, now opponent can play either knight f6, and then again you just play simple short castle, and then we just enter into either Morphy or max length. If someone plays bishop c5, then we just go for short castle, and d6 is bad just because of c3 d4, so the main move, which is knight to f6, and again we can enter with the max length with this move order. Actually, I have prepared this line probably in 2007, this direct d4 move order, but actually there are some drawback. There is one particular drawback, in fact, and that is bishop takes d4, and after knight takes d4 here, let's say knight takes d4, knight takes d4. Now there are 2 moves, bishop e3 and f4. Let's say f4, which is the main move, and after d6, okay, just takes, and now bishop to g5. And here the direct rook to g8, a very interesting idea, or just queen e7 followed by rook g8 with the idea of knight e6, bishop d7 and long castle. This is a little bit annoying, and that's why I would just like to prefer it with the move order third d4, so that we basically avoiding this bishop c5 and bishop d4 idea. And after d4, let's say takes, and now we just play bishop to c4. So by this tricky move order, what we have achieved, we simply stop black's bishop c5 and bishop d4 when we just used to play d4. So now hope you are just clear with all the move orders, plans and ideas. There are mainly 3 move orders, okay, even 4 move orders I would say. The second d4 move order, second bishop c4 move order. These two move orders are specially designed to avoid Petrov. The another move order is the pure Italian, that is 2 knight f3 and 3 bishop c4. The pure Scotch move order, which is basically knight f3, 2 knight f3, knight c6, d4, takes and bishop c4. After bishop c4, all other lines will be made by pure knight d4 entering into Scotch. Some some may argue that why not c3, but I already told you that some lines will give equality. Even in my future videos, I'll basically try to cover it. Why not other moves and why straight away knight d4? So any other move after fourth bishop c4, we just play knight d4. Any other move, then fourth knight f6 or fourth bishop c5. Again, after knight f6, basically we have two ideas. We can go for e5 or short castle. Short castle allows to enter into Morphy. Knight f6 allows e5. If we try to keep the e4 report as same, after bishop c5, we just play c3 and play sixth move e5. If we want to enter into max slang, again after bishop c5, here we just simply play short castle. And after knight f6, we enter into max slang. But here opponent can play d6, which is other than max lang attack. He is not allowing max lang, so we have to cover it this line as well in a separate session. So hope you have enjoyed this stuff, friends. I'll just show you the content which I have prepared. This is everything for only Scotch Gambit, which we are going to look at in our future videos. And today we have just covered the introduction part, the Repertoire 1 intro and the Repertoire 2 intro. So in our upcoming videos, we are just going to start with this one and the Mora Gambit 2. So basically we are trying to learn both openings simultaneously, because against e4 there are mainly only two options. Other options are there, but the main options are two, that is e4, e5 and c5. French, Caracon, center counter, Perk, all the openings will be covered later, but we are trying to cover these openings first. Okay, so from next Saturday, we are just going to start this two most awaiting opening series, that is Scotch Gambit and the Mora Gambit. Stay tuned and don't forget to like and subscribe my channel. Thank you friends. See you later. Bye.